Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever you're actually watching this. Merry Christmas. I hope that this holiday season has really greeted you and you're really enjoying this time. I know it's much like you and everybody else. Me and Abby have been caught up in the hustle and bustle of the holiday season, of getting gifts for those that we love, of planning for holiday festivities. And so it's become real easy, probably much like you, to get wrapped up in everything and realize that we sometimes need to take a breath and look back at what's going on in our life and just kind of take inventory for what's going on. And part of that inventory is looking at some of the things that have gone on in our life. Just this last week, we had our live Q&A this last week, and then I had the honor of doing Faith X Life with Sarah as Micaiah was gone for the week. And then I had the opportunity to speak on Wednesday night. And I actually wanted to take a little bit from that Wednesday night and expand upon it a little bit. After talking with Abby, some questions had come up, and I wanted to discuss it because I think there's an aspect in the story of Zechariah and Elizabeth that I think is really vital to understand for us from a mental health perspective and the freedom perspective. And that is this idea that Zechariah and Elizabeth had done everything right. They came from a background of righteousness. They came from very well-respected backgrounds, the line of Abijah and the line of Aaron. They had prayed, they had kept the faith, at least so it seemed. They prayed, they sought. Zechariah, when the angel Gabriel appears to him, is in the temple. He was chosen with the honor of going into the temple and giving the yearly sacrifice. So, this was a big deal. You don't get in that position without being righteous. But despite that fact, Zechariah and Elizabeth are advanced in age without a child. Now, for Elizabeth, that's a mark against her. It's embarrassing that she can't produce a child. It's a sense of dishonor that she feels. For Zechariah, he doesn't have the ability to pass on his lineage. And legacy is something that's huge, especially to men in that culture. So when the angel Gabriel comes to Zechariah and says, hey, that thing you've been praying for all these years, I'm going to give it to you. It's coming. It's provided. Should be an amazing experience for him. But what happens? He says, now, Gabriel, I know that you sit with God. I know you are there. I know you have this conversation with him. But how do I know this is going to be true, that this will happen? Because I'm an old man. Look at me. I can't produce a child. If I couldn't produce a child in the past, how can I produce a child today or in the future? Now, if you read the story, you know that Gabriel silences Zechariah until 8 days after John the Baptist, Zechariah's son, if you don't know that, is born. But this raises the question of why did Zechariah, who had been praying for so many years for a child, have such disbelief when told that the thing you've been praying for, the thing you've been waiting for, that breakthrough, now it's finally here, for him to say, well, wait a minute, no, that can't be. Well, here's the reality of the situation, and I think from a Christian perspective, something we need to grasp. And that is, sometimes we get so wrapped up in the repetition of what we're doing religiously that we miss the true meaning of why we're doing it. See, for Zechariah, his prayers had become not faith-filled, but ritual-filled. He had gotten wrapped up in the ritual of praying, in the ritual of just bringing it to God, that he just did it because that's what he's always done. He didn't want to miss it. Yeah, it's kind of like, when you have a habit and you've just done it and you do it and you do it and you're just checking something off. The prayer every day for an heir, for a child, had become just something for him to check off. He didn't have the faith anymore behind his prayer. And if we don't have faith behind our prayer, then why are we praying if we don't really believe or we don't have the expectation that God's really going to do anything? And so for us today, as we look at this, there are things in our lives that we are praying for, we're seeking for. We really want that breakthrough. We want to overcome that addiction. We want to have a fixed relationship. We want to have a prodigal son or daughter come home. And so we pray for it. Meanwhile, we don't have any real faith or belief behind it that God's going to do it. Now, this might be, our history might say, you know what? It hasn't happened in the past. What makes you think it's going to happen in the future? And that's the problem that keeps us trapped and keeps us from receiving what God has, is this belief that because it hasn't happened, it's not going to happen. Now, the reality of the situation is, if we want to find that breakthrough, if we want to have what God has for us, then we need to leave behind those things from the past and those beliefs from the past. And believing that just because it didn't happen doesn't mean it's not going to happen. See, when God tells you or promises you something, there's nothing that can revoke that. Pastor George a couple weeks ago said a gift given doesn't get old. It might get dusty, but it doesn't get old, because God's gifts, God's promise is irrevocable. If He promises you something, it's going to happen. Now, the process to get there may not be what you envision. The process for Zechariah and Elizabeth was not what they envisioned. I'm sure they envisioned that they were going to have children early on in age and watch their kids grow up and watch their grandkids and all this stuff, all these visions that they had as young husband and wife, that they were going to be parents. But the reality is they're now later in life where they have all this time where they've been praying and seeking, but they didn't get it. So that history needs to be pushed aside and replaced with the belief and the expectation that because God has said it, because God has promised it, it is going to happen. See, and as Christians, we miss that so many times. So I want to caution you that, especially in this season of gift giving, the season of receiving, the season of petition. I mean, this time of year can be difficult for some because it shows us how broken our families and our pasts are. It puts it right in front of us, where you might have some families that are wonderful and put together and look like a Norman Rockwell painting. Meanwhile, you look at your family and it looks more like Mad Magazine. But the reality is, God has a plan and a purpose, and it's not all going to look the same. It's not going to look perfect. And you need to have the belief that just because it doesn't look like what you expect it to look like at this point doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Because in reality, it is our belief that it prevents us from receiving what God has for us. When our expectation is things aren't going to change, then we can't receive what God has for us because we're not expecting or looking for God to do anything. And we get wrapped up so many times because of this in the same old patterns over and over and over again, where our thought processes, our patterns, our environment isn't serving us to help us get to where we want to get. Yet the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. So if in your life you keep seeing the same thing over and over and over again, you might need to look at why those same things keep happening, why those same mistakes keep getting made, why that same struggle is going on. Is it because of expectation? You don't have expectation that's going to happen? Instead, you have expectation that is just going to stay the same? Are you praying prayers? Are you seeking God without the expectation that God, being God, can fix it, can heal it, can, because He loves you, give you the breakthrough you're looking for, open the doors that you've been knocking on? What is it that's preventing you? Because God has this for you. He has a calling and purpose for you. He has a breakthrough for you. It may not look like what you want, but it's there. And if you're missing it, you have to ask yourself one of two questions. Is there something that I'm not doing? Or is there something that God is doing and teaching me and building up in me to prepare me for when I get that blessing? So in this season of gift giving and receiving gifts, I hope you accept the gift of God as we celebrate Jesus. I hope you receive the breakthrough you're looking for as you give to God your expectation that Him being God, Him being a loving Father, wants to give you a hope and a future, wants to give you that purpose, wants to give you that breakthrough. I hope that you receive what you're looking for as you give God your expectation and your devotion. Merry Christmas. This is our last one before Christmas, so I hope you enjoy this week. You enjoy this time as you celebrate the birth of Jesus. You celebrate your friends, your family, and you celebrate what God has done for you this year as we get ready to turn our face to what God is going to do in expectation next year. So God bless you. Merry Christmas.